else. But the reason that was wrong for, I think, that culture and that time was Reuben usurped his father's authority. And I think Jacob probably never respected Reuben the same way again. In fact, again, once we get to chapter 50 and 49 and he blesses his sons, Reuben is out. Reuben loses his birthright. So Reuben is unconvincing to Jacob. He cannot convince him to let Benjamin go. And the other thing you see is Reuben is not offering himself. He's offering his sons. You know, which one of us as parents would offer our children in our stead? I mean, that's one of the most selfish things you can do. And so I think maybe that's part of it too. So he's unconvincing. And some time passes, and then Judah comes. And Judah tries to convince Jacob to let Benjamin go to Egypt. And Judah convinces him. And I don't know, maybe they were just more hungry at this point. But Judah's offer is a little more personal. Judah doesn't say, you can kill my sons. Judah says, I'm personally responsible. I am the one personally responsible for this. And so again, Judah wanted to kill Joseph back in the day. And so you see a little bit of change, evolution, and personality here going on. But whatever the reason, Jacob accepts that. And so Jacob lets Benjamin go. And then all the brothers go back to Egypt. Chapter 23, another marker about Joseph's faith. Or verse 23 there of chapter 43, you see Joseph had taught his household, his Egyptian household, about God. Just another piece of evidence is Joseph's, where his mind is at and where his faith is. He even taught his Egyptian household about God. So verse 29 of chapter 43, they all come in and they see them, and Joseph lifts up his eyes and he sees Benjamin, his mother's son. His mother's son. Those little details I think are in there for a reason. This was his real brother. This was his full brother. Judah, Reuben, those are his half-brothers. And they're the ones, oh, by the way, who sold him into slavery. Benjamin was young. Benjamin had no part of that. And that's his true brother. And so when Joseph sees Benjamin, he reacts in this extremely, how should I put it, an emotional way. And so, we asked the question, why did he react this way now? Why was he so overcome with emotion now? Because he saw Benjamin. Was it because he loved Benjamin because he was his real brother? Absolutely, I think that's part of it. Was it because he saw that his brothers maybe had matured? I mean, all those years, do you think Joseph was wondering, I wonder what they're going to do to Benjamin now that I'm gone? They did that to me because I was Jacob's favorite. Benjamin's going to be his favorite. Do you think for 20 years he was worried sick about his brother Benjamin? I think he probably was. And so, maybe it shows that his brothers have matured. They were trying to protect him, actually. They didn't want to bring him to Egypt. And so Joseph now sees this kind of evolution and a little bit of growth in his brothers. And so I think that's part of his emotion too. And then finally, again, I think the catalyst for all of this is God's plan is being fulfilled. The brothers are all alive, and you can see the path of them all coming to Egypt now. You can see the path of God's will, that the sheaves of grain bow down to Joseph, that the stars and the moon bow down to Joseph. That vision is he can see it coming true. And I would not overlook that as part of Joseph's emotion here. It is the fulfillment of 20 years of doubt that Joseph had about that promise God made. So Joseph then conducts one more test. And again, if you just read the story, because this is the way I always read it, you get to the story and you're like laboring. You're like, why is he doing another little test? I mean, just forgive him, Joseph. Just let it go. But I think, again, Jacob's got to come to Egypt. The whole family has to come to Egypt. They're going to die in Israel if they stay there. If they come to Egypt, they can live under his protection. God's will be fulfilled, and the nation of Israel is going to grow. We know that that's how they grow. That's how they're protected for 300 years living in Egypt. Slaves or not, that's how God's people grow. And Joseph has to get them there. And so he can't just give them grain and send them on their way, because 130-year-old Jacob is not making that trip unless you give him a good reason. And so Joseph gives them a good reason. He sets up his test. He puts the silver chalice in Benjamin's knapsack. And then he said, oh, why did you steal my cup? You're staying here. And then they're all like, no, you can't take him. Jacob's going to die if we go back and we tell him that this happened. And then that's when the moment when Joseph reveals himself to them. And that's how we get to chapter 45. Any comments about those? That was a longer kind of background run, but I think that narrative is really important. So any comments about 42 through 44 before we hit the text of our main focus?
It's been 20 years since
I believe so. I believe it was about 20 years from the time he was sold in the pit until now. So he's a 37-year-old man at this point. Yeah, just again, so 42 through 44, it's important because it validates the prophetic dreams that Joseph had, and it explains the backstory of how the Israelites are going to come to Egypt. So I have put up some pictures here. I like pictures. I don't know if you can see it. The picture on the left is a deep, deep pit. I don't know, that's 60, 70 feet deep or something, and there's little stairs leading down. I don't know if that's a 4,000-year-old pit. But that's one possibility of a place where Joseph would store his grain. Because it's in the ground, so you don't have to build up. My mom's dad grew up on he owned a farm in Indiana, and corn silo. Tommy knows what I'm talking about. And I remember, he would let us, when it was full of corn, he would let us climb up in the little hatch in the top, and we'd run around the top inside the corn silo, and your feet sink in the corn, you breathe in the dust, and then there's that thing in the middle that turns, and to a 6-year-old, that was terrifying. But yeah, so instead of having to build up, you dig down. And it's cool down there, and so you steal the top. And then there's a little staircase on the side, if you can see it. So as the grain lowers down, you can just walk down. You don't have to, rappel off the side to get your grain or anything. So it makes sense. And then there's these kind of termite hive-looking things. These are kind of cool to me because, you make it out of clay and brick, and you put the grain in and you seal it. And then it's stored, it's sealed, it's protected from oxygen and rain and bugs. And then you crack open one of them when you take the grain out, and all the rest are still sealed. So you just crack them open as you need. So that one's kind of cool. This is a mosaic, or an ancient hieroglyph. On the bottom right shows Egyptian art. If you look at the top, there's fields of grain, and then in the middle there's just sacks of grain just being dumped out on the ground. This immeasurable amount of grain that Joseph was able to store up in those 7 years of plenty. So, anyway, visuals. I like pictures. Okay, so chapter 45. So we'll go around. I think Ms. Jean usually starts, so we'll just read, and I'll follow the slides as we go.
his servants well. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load your animals and depart. Go to the land of Canaan. Bring your father and your household, and come to me. And I will give you the best of the land in Egypt, and you will eat of the fat of the land. Now you are commanded to do this. Take carts out of the land of Egypt for the little ones and your wives. Bring your fathers and come. Also, do not be concerned about your goods, for the best of the land of Egypt is yours. Then the sons of Israel did so. Joseph gave them carts according to the command of Pharaoh, and he gave them provisions for the journey. He gave to all of them, to each man, changes of garments. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver, and fine 5 changes of garments. And he said to his father these things, 10 donkeys loaded with goods of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and food for all his father for the journey. So he sent his brothers away, and they departed, and said to them, see that you do not become troubled along the way.
We'll finish the chapter. I'll read it. So they went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. They told him, Joseph is still alive. In fact, he is ruler of all Egypt. Jacob was stunned. He did not believe them. But when they told him everything Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts Joseph had sent to carry him back, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And Israel said, I'm convinced my son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. My favorite verse of all of this is verse 24. Depends on your translation, but I like the NIV here. Don't quarrel on the way. Joseph scolds his older brothers. And I don't know if that was meant to be a joke, but I don't know. I kind of like that verse. So here, more pictures. So it's kind of fuzzy, but generally from southern Israel down to the land of Goshen. Most people think Goshen that they talk about here was somewhere in the kind of eastern portion of the Nile River Delta. And that was, if you follow the coast, it's about 300 miles. If you take the route that Moses took many years later, it's like 1,000 miles. So I don't know exactly which way they would have gone. I would assume they'd go the shorter route, kind of hug the coastline where there's still some greenery and some civilization. But anyway, it's about 300 miles. So if you figure with carts and wagons and tents, maybe 10 miles a day, I don't know. So about a month. It'd take them about a month to go from Egypt and back, or to Egypt and back. So land of Goshen, very fertile land. Again, the picture's a little washed out here, but on the left you see that's a modern picture of that region, but it's extremely fertile land. Good for farming, good for agriculture, good for livestock. Looks pretty nice, right? I mean, if somebody was going to give you land and they said, that's your land right there, you know, you'd be pretty happy about that. And on the right there's some palm trees and some cities in the back, but here's I've gotten into art history a little bit, and again, the picture's a little washed out, but this is the reveal when Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. And again, it's a little dark, but on the left, and again, you know, back to Michael's point and Wally's point, each of these brothers have their own personality. And Peter von Cornelius, when he painted this picture, some of the brothers are kind of turning away ashamed. Some of them are up hugging Joseph. And, you know, he had interpreted. And the reason I like art history is because you see somebody's very thoughtful interpretation of these events. Some of the brothers are effusive. They're just so happy that he's alive. And some of them are, you know, kind of ashamed and terrified and kind of turning away. But anyway, it's an interesting visual of how that meeting would have gone. Of course, we know immediately that at least some of the brothers were terrified. In fact, they're unable to think, talk, speak, because, and you think about it, this guy that they were already terrified of, the second most powerful man in Egypt, which is really the world, who they were already terrified of, turns out to be someone that has cause to do them harm. Someone that they slighted that they betrayed and wanted to murder 20 years ago. They are absolutely terrified of this guy now. And, you know, I think about their perspective is from a human perspective. They're terrified because they think Joseph has good cause to do them harm. good cause to take vengeance on. And from a human perspective, he does. I mean, again, go back to the Count of Monte Cristo example. We read that book, or at least I do, and you just feel so satisfied. You know, it just seems so justified that the hero does this to his enemies. You know, it's clever, and it's sneaky, and it's slick, and we just feel so good about it. And I think from a human perspective, that is, you know, the way we view relationships. It's almost transactional. If somebody does me wrong, I can do them wrong. If somebody does good to me, I should be good to them. If I do good to somebody else, they should do good back to me. And that's kind of how we think. And then I would argue that that's very kind of human thinking. And you see it in the New Testament. Take example for husbands and wives. God does not tell us, husbands, love your wives as long as they're good to you. He doesn't say, wives, submit to your husbands as long as you agree with everything they say. He says, husbands, love your wives the way Christ loved the church. Christ died for the church. And I think about that all the time. I think the divorce rate in America is still something like 50%. And among Christians, depends on how you count Christians, right? But I think among Christians, it's about the same. I mean, people who know the truth have the same level of parting ways in a marriage as people who have no appreciation for the truth. And that's really sad. And I think it's because that's the way we view relationships. And that's one of the things that just struck me about these chapters here. You know, that transactional kind of view we have of relationships and how we deal with each other. I mean, how many marriages have broken apart because one person or the other says, you know, they wronged me and I just can't get over that. And I would go back again to Joseph's overwhelming belief in God's plan. His overwhelming faith in God. And you know, the lesson book talked about the importance of family relationships, and it gave examples of brothers not treating each other right throughout the Bible, and I think that's good, but I think it's only half the point. Being good to your family is not the end. Praising God and glorifying God, that is the end. And being good to your family, that's a means to get there. That's the way I think about it. And so, you know, I see here when they're dismayed at his presence, that's because they're carnal in thinking. And maybe it's a theme for the tribes of Israel later, because that's how they think. That's how the Israelites continue to think. They think in those very human terms. We want a king, right? We want a king because we want to be like the other nations. And Joseph stands apart from his brothers in this way. Joseph, remember, he got in trouble a long time ago because he ratted them out. He was the snitch. They did something bad. He went and told his dad. And again, we read that story and we think, Joseph, like, you know, there's better ways to handle that. Don't be a snitch. Joseph had a stronger moral compass than his brothers. Joseph had a stronger appreciation for right and wrong than his brothers did. And that's the godly way of thinking, I think. And so anyway, I see that here. Their terror at his presence is a marker of their lack of faith. And his reaction and his lack of hatred toward them is a marker of his faith in God. And I'll read one more verse, and I keep skipping ahead to chapter 50 because I think it brings all this together. But I'll just read one verse from chapter 50 real quick. Genesis 50, verses 19 through 21. Joseph said to his brothers, this is after Jacob dies, by the way. So they all come to Egypt in chapter 50. Now Jacob is dead. And what happens? Their brothers are terrified again. After 10 years of living in Egypt under Joseph's protection, after all the good he's done, they're terrified again. Because Jacob died and they think, oh, wow, Joseph was maybe he was only good to us because he's waiting for Jacob to die. And so they're terrified again. So Joseph says to his brothers when they're terrified, do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. That is the voice of God, talking to a very human reaction. I am intensely impressed with Joseph throughout this book. And it's not just because he's forgiving and he's good with his relationship with his brothers. It's because he's so God-centered. Everything he does, he has God at the forefront of his mind. So as we continue to look at chapter 45, Verse 7, again, God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. And you see it there, right there. You know the history of Genesis and Exodus. You know that the Israelites multiply incredibly. Because it's not just that he brings them to Egypt and they kind of live in this kind of dusty corner of Egypt and scrape by on a living. They go to the land of Goshen. They go to where they can make multiple flocks, where they're strong, healthy, hardy people, where they can reproduce and produce and produce and become this multi-million strong people. And sure, they become slaves in Egypt, but that was just at the end. God put them to Egypt to protect them, to protect that remnant of his people, so they could be safe, so they could continue to multiply, so God's plan could continue to be done. Joseph doesn't let any feelings of resentment come between him and God's plan for him and his brothers. Saving lives. That's kind of emphasized in this chapter quite a bit. Saving lives. God saves lives here, even through a selfish, violent act. He saves lives even through a betrayal. And I can't help but see a parallel there with the cross. In fact, if you read the Gospel of John, you look at Jesus and the way he interacts with his brothers. His brothers are pretty nasty to him. In fact, at one point, they tell him, Jesus, you should go up to Jerusalem right now. And he says, the Pharisees are waiting to kill me. And they say, yeah, but you should just go up. You'll be fine. I mean, they tried to kill him. They wanted to kill him. And look, his brothers change of heart later, at least some of them. But, I see that foreshadowing here. A betrayal leading to the salvation of lives. I don't think that is a coincidence. Verse 8, we read this. This was interesting to me as well. Verse 8, God has made me a father to Pharaoh. A father to Pharaoh. And I mulled that one over for a while and did some study on that one, because what exactly does that mean? Joseph was clearly still subordinate to Pharaoh. Maybe he was older than Pharaoh. I don't know. Maybe so he was kind of the wise counselor to Pharaoh and he was the father figure. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how old Pharaoh was at the time. What I think may be part of this, if you go back to chapter 17, back to the original promise that God made to Abraham, he told Abraham, I will make you the father of many nations. Father of many nations. And Joseph, as the son of Abraham, now he's not the covenantal promised son right now, but I think you can see that in there. That as the father of Pharaoh, as the father of many nations, all the nations coming to Egypt for wealth, for grain, for survival. And so Joseph is now the father of Pharaoh. He's the father of that. He is now the covenantal promise. And if you look at, say, First Chronicles 5, we get a description all the way over in 1 Chronicles 5, the first couple of verses, that Reuben lost his firstborn status. That historian describes that to us. Reuben lost the firstborn status. His rights as firstborn were given to the sons of Joseph. And though Judah was the strongest of his brothers and a ruler came from him, the rights of the firstborn belonged to Joseph. And so you kind of see the covenantal promise go through Joseph now. And it's, a little confusing because David comes through Judah and, Joseph, the father of Jesus, comes through Judah. And so that's where the line of the Messiah kind of goes. It doesn't go through Joseph. But, I think Ephraim, Joseph's son, loses it. We'll get there. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm digressing. But anyway, I think there's something in here about the covenantal promise and the father of many nations, the father of Pharaoh. Okay, so as we continue through 45, now they have to convince Jacob that Joseph is still alive. And I think that was kind of a tall order for them, because how do you go to your father now? I mean, it's one thing to be overjoyed, right? Our sin wasn't really as bad as we thought. He didn't actually die. Actually, he's doing great. Actually, we were fulfilling God's plan. Good for us, right? Yay for us. We actually did a good thing. I don't know how they think that. But then you can only imagine they think, now we have to go tell Jacob what we did. We have to tell him he's alive. And we can either lie and say, oh, well, we were mistaken. We just found his bloody coat of many colors, or you own up to your mistake. A 20-year-old wound that's been festering and festering and festering, and you can just come clean. But you got to go tell your father what you did. How do you go tell Jacob at this point? We lied to you. We cut up his robe, put pig's blood on it, and gave it to you to convince you that he was dead. And we actually sold him for 20 shekels to be a slave. That's only 2 shekels apiece. 2 shekels apiece if they divided it up evenly between the 10 of them. And now they got to go back to Jacob and they got to tell him that they did that. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I wondered about that too. Yeah, that's right. I think that's a great observation. I mean, because you can see him, right? You can see him kind of like, Reuben's like, all right, well, we got to tell Jacob, so here's what I think we should do. And Judah's like, no, I got a better plan. And you can see him, just like when they had him in the pit, right? You can see him doing it all over again. And Joseph comes over the top and says, don't quarrel, just tell him the truth. It's going to be okay. Just tell him the truth. Yeah, great point. Yes, ma'am.
I think that has to do with something. You're talking about how all this is really good and the type of cross. It's the same kind of thing where they make a total different there's a heart. It's all a heart.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And because there is atonement somewhere. I mean, they're going to have to pay for this. And maybe Joseph isn't going to be the one to render judgment on them, but you can better believe their father will. And you better own up to it. And I bet they were pretty scared of that. 130 years old though he might be. I mean, I remember my granddad was 85 and I was scared to death of him. And I was 21, 6'2", 220. He was about this tall, $130 soaking wet. And I was terrified of that guy. Nobody spends 2.5 years in Europe in the 40s and comes back, not to be afraid of. So that guy was tough. And you can only imagine Jacob, all the things Jacob survived in it. Jacob was the guy that wrestled an angel. So if you think you're tough, just, So yeah, I think that's a great point. I think they were terrified of Jacob. I think Michael had a great observation. So anyway, they go. And I don't know exactly what this reunion was like there in verse 15. He kissed all of his brothers, wept upon them. After that, his brothers talked with him. There's a lot that could have been said in there. I had, years ago, my preacher did a lesson on this, and it was kind of a hypothetical. What each of his brothers did with their 2 shekels that they got. What each of the 10 brothers did with their 2 shekels. And he was a great Old Testament history scholar, so he kind of took what he knew about each of the tribes and their personalities and how would this guy have reacted. And when he got to this part of the story, he said, did some of them try to give it back to him? Here's what, here was the cost of your slavery. I'm just going to give this back to you and then I'll make it all okay, Did some of them go spend it just quickly and just get it over with? Did some of them just hold it and just regret for years and years and years? I don't know how we can quite comprehend the emotion you have for a 20-year crime and this kind of reaction and this, if you've ever read Crime and Punishment, I labored through it years ago, the abridged version, but the crime takes place in the first 20 pages, maybe, 25 pages, and then there's like 700 pages of punishment. And the guy isn't really punished. It's not like he's being flogged for 700 pages. It's the psychological torture Dostoevsky describes this guy going through. He commits this crime for stupid reasons in the first little bit of the book, and then for the rest of the book, the guilt, he describes the guilt. You know, Russians are always about this, like, emotional, depressing guilt stuff. But he's just so guilty. And you see that in the brothers there a little bit. You can only imagine 20 years of guilt that they have building up here. Great, good comments. And then we have Pharaoh's reaction to when he finds out that his brothers are alive. And again, I don't know if this is God's hand directly. I mean, we've seen God control a Pharaoh before or later. But Pharaoh this is like a pretty good guy here to me. I mean, he's the guy that promotes Joseph. He's the guy that gives Joseph all this trust and confidence. He's the guy that then invites, welcomes warmly Jacob and these Israelites into Egypt. I mean, this is overwhelming. This is a much, much different kind of Pharaoh than we see in the Exodus. But for whatever reason, Pharaoh, maybe just out of his love of Joseph, maybe God's hand directly guiding this, but Pharaoh invites them all, and he reiterates Joseph's promise: we're going to give you the best of the land. Don't even bring your stuff. We're going to give you new, good Egyptian stuff. Just travel light. Don't worry about your tents and all that stuff. You don't need to bring anything. We got flocks, we got herds, we got tents, we got clothes, we got everything. Pretty generous, pretty amazing offer. And so they do that. And so Joseph gives them the wagons. They go back. And then they convince Jacob that it's time to come. And so after a little bit of haranguing, and we talked about this a little bit, but verse 26, Jacob's heart became numb, and he did not believe them. Jacob, all these feelings, I think, of Rachel come flooding back, probably. The love of his life. 14 years, 7 years twice he labored for this woman before he even was married to her. I don't know, but I think that's probably part of his emotion here. I mean, it was such a wonderful thought to think that Rachel's other son was still alive. That he just, it's like if we'd rather just have something not be true than the hope that it could be true and the hope that we would lose it again. That little bit of hope is sometimes terrifying, but for whatever reason, they're able to convince Jacob. And he says, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And then Jacob, here called Israel, says, it is enough. Joseph is alive. I'll go and see him before I die. And then that's it. That's the last word on God's plan to get him to Egypt. And, we're going to finish here. But I go back again to that vision Joseph had. God's plans will be fulfilled. Not in our time. Not when we think it's supposed to be time. But in his time. And Joseph never, ever, ever lost sight of that vision. I can only imagine every single day of his life in Egypt he thought about that vision. I mean, the thing that got him thrown in a pit. God, how could you lie to me? How could you tell me this thing that wasn't true? And for all these years, it hasn't come true. And then here we have this verse. Jacob says, I will go see him before I die. And that's it. They're all going to Egypt. And that vision, God's plan, God's will, it's about to be done. And that was good enough for Jacob, or good enough for Joseph. And then we'll get into the rest of the text next week. So any comments up to that point? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think that's a great point. And because again, later, remember when Jacob does die, they're all worried that that's going to kind of change Joseph's demeanor. And Joseph, the first thing he asked him when he revealed himself was, is my father living? Of course, they don't answer right away because they're terrified. But yeah, I think, knowing these guys, they absolutely had that conversation. Do we just lie to him again?
I also think the dynamics of the relationship between and that they each other were first starters, they got out
Yeah.
We're all very different, even though life experiences that maybe we do differently, you see yourself differently. When it comes to something that makes everyone as a whole,
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And don't let me dismiss the importance of getting along with your family. But I'm glad you say that because it's worth repeating. Certainly, God's will and God's glory is at the end. That's the most important goal. But I think the way we deal with each other as Christians, as family members, I mean, that is extremely important. And there's a lot of attention given to that in the scriptures. And you're right. I mean, even in the face of trial and in the face of even affronts to each other. I mean, over Christmas, right? COVID is just stressing everything out. And we had all these stressors about who can see who and who's been exposed where. It's the same thing we have at work and everywhere else within our family. You know, are we going to sit 6 feet apart while we open presents on Christmas Day? Some people wanted to do that. Some people didn't. And that caused a little bit of emotional turmoil. And you know, me and my wife, we were driving home, 15 hours from North Florida back here, and so we had a lot of time to talk about this. And we were talking about it, and how could she have said this or he have done this? And at the end of the drive, we were like, they're a family. Just let it go. Because ultimately, this is our family for the rest of our life, whether we like it or not. And we do. We love our family. But sometimes you just forgive, and I think that's the Joseph way. That's the Jesus way. The brothers' way. Let's not talk about that. Let's look at Joseph. He's our role model. Great comment. Any other comments about that? We're about out of time here. Okay, great. So I'm teaching next week too, week 11. I got the next couple of weeks, so I'll take us just about to the end of the book of Genesis. Next week we'll hit chapter 47, and we'll get Joseph coming to Egypt, or Jacob finally coming to Egypt, and that's kind of a big deal. So anyway, thanks for your attention this morning. If you guys have any questions about, I know I just kind of talk a lot, but if you have any big questions, either email me or hit me up afterwards, and I'll do some research and try and figure out the answer for you. So thank you very much for your attention this morning.
Thank you.